This is our second lesson on our Flappy Scratch game where we've created our own version of Flappy Bird. So although it's lesson 5 in our Scratch unit, it's the second lesson for Flappy Bird. And in this lesson we're going to look to develop our scrolling background. Before we move on with our scrolling background, we have our knowledge recall from previous lessons, and the questions that you need to answer are: what does forever code do? What does this operator do? And I've got this asterisk here, so what does this asterisk do? What is validation? And what is digital footprint? So you need to pause the video and answer these questions in your ePortfolio. So hopefully you've answered the questions from your ePortfolio for the knowledge recall, and the answers could have all been found in your knowledge organizer. Today we're going to look to use operators and variables to make a scrolling background, and we need to remember what an operator is and what a variable is, and we'll recap this during the lesson. And from the lesson you need to be up to this stage where you've created your Flappy character, that when you press a button the character moves up and it naturally falls down with gravity, changing Y by 0.5, so it's constantly falling down until you press the click button. So you should already be at this stage. And we're going to create the background. Ordinarily I'd get you to make a background on the stage, but in this game, in the Flappy game, you're going to need to make the different parts of the background as an actual sprite. So make them as sprites, not as backgrounds. And this is what we're looking to create. My first background is going to be really simple. It's all going to be one colour for my background. Keep it in one colour throughout your game. So we're going to create a rule later that if your sprite touches the colour green, or whatever colour you change your background to be, that's when an instruction happens. So that's why you need to keep it one colour. And we are going to need to name your backgrounds as you progress through your game. And I'm just going to call mine BG0 for background 0, background 1, background 2, and so on. So that's what you need to do. It is really important that you name your backgrounds, and I would recommend you call it BG0 from the start. So this is the first background I'm going to create. It's just a very simple background so that at the start of the game we're not out, we're not over straight away. My character can move around. And then my next background is going to be a little bit more complex, where I'm going to have to fly my character, my sprite, through a gap. And that's the idea of the game. So you don't want to make it too complicated, you don't want to make it impossible, and you want to start off fairly easy, and the game can get more complex as you progress along. So I'm going to show you how to create the first bit of the background. So in Scratch, what you need to do is create a new sprite. And to create a new sprite, I'll just make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. To make a new sprite, what you're going to do is just click, move my head out the way, a new sprite button here, and you are going to paint a sprite. So it's sprite 0. Straight away I'm going to call this BG0, so it's background 0. And a little clue here is just to zoom out and make sure you're zoomed all the way out on your backdrop. Now I've decided to create this green look for my background, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint with a brush a little bit of green onto my stage. So I'm choosing a green, choose this green, and I'm just going to paint a splodge of colour that I'm going to remove later, but this is just so I can use it as a colour picker. And what I'm now going to do is draw a rectangle, and I'm going to also colour my fill. I'm going to use the ink dropper here and just choose this green. So now I've got the same green for both my fill and the outline, and that's quite important. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle, and I don't want it to take up too much of my game, so I've created at the bottom. I'm just going to draw another one right up at the top. I'm going to fill the whole width of my game there. And now I've done that, I can just delete my splodge that I started with as my colour picker. So that's the first background 0 for my game. And you can see in my actual game it's a little bit high here. I can just move it now to where I want it actually in my game. So I've just repositioned it to fit in my game as I want it. So that's background 0, my first bit completed. So I can just, as I now want to check this, I'm happy with everything, I can copy this. And what I can do is right click, duplicate. And it's called it background 2. So I'm just going to rename this background 1. So I'm now working on background 2. Let me just check here. So I'll click on background 2. And all I might want to do now is just add a little rectangle. Just like this. And maybe one at the bottom. Just for background 2. And I can move this just over here for the time being. I'm just going to move it level and over to the right. So that's background, my second background, but it's called background 1. That's now created. So I've got 2 backgrounds. Again, I can duplicate this. I can duplicate background 0, and it's called it background 2. I'm happy with the name. And for background 2, again, I can make this one just a little bit more complicated. I might put a long barrier down there, so my flappy ghost is going to have to fly down and back up. And again, I can just move this right over to the right hand side, out the way, just slowly dragging it over and up, just so it's only just seeing on the actual screen. So that's making the different stages to the background, and that's the stage you need to make first. So I've not given any instructions to my background, I've just made a few backgrounds so we can make more of these as we go along later on in our game. So we've made our different backgrounds and we have called them BG0, BG1, BG2 and so on. The next stage then would be to give some code to our game. So again, we're going to create this Scollx. Now this is thinking back to our Cartesian coordinates, the X and Y coordinates, and I want the X to scroll. So it's horizontally scrolling. So at the start of the game, we're going to set our Scollx to 0. We need to make this variable. It will not exist in Scratch. We do have to make this. And then I'm going to use a forever loop to change my Scollx by -2. So it's constantly going down. The value of Scollx is going down. And that's the next bit that we're going to create. So in our game, we need to make that variable of Scollx. So what I can do is go to my code. I can do this on the ghost. I can go to code and I can look to create on the control, on the event, at the start of the game. And then I can look to create a variable. And as I said, that variable will not exist yet. So I can make a variable and I can just call this variable Scollx. So I've left it as all one word. Variable names are good without a space in them. And I'm going to apply this to all sprites. So I've got Scollx for all sprites and click OK. So I now have a Scollx variable. You can see in my game it appears at the top here, and I don't want that to happen. So all I have to do is untick the Scollx and it hides away. So at the start of the game, I need to set my variable. So set my variable, and I can change the word my variable to Scollx. So I can set Scollx to 0. Just zoom in a little bit, make that a little bit easier to see. So at the start of the game, I've set Scollx to 0. So we've got that information here. The next bit we need to do is I need to tell my Scollx to keep changing. So I'm going to start from an event again. At the start of the game, when I click the green flag, I'm going to tell it this time in a control. I'm going to use a forever loop. So I find forever. Here's my forever. I can drag a forever in. And then I can build the code within the forever loop, so it keeps looping round and round and round forever until I tell it to stop. And all I'm looking to do on my variable is I'm looking to change a variable. So I can drag that in, change, and the variable I want it to change is Scollx. and I'm wanting it to change by -2. So I'm wanting the variable to go down constantly, keep looping and going down. So that's what I've created there. I've told my variable to constantly go down. And that's the first bit of code that we're looking to create for our scrolling background. So it's important that we've got this, and I've done that on my Flappy character onto my sprite there. The next stage then is to look at each bit of code for our background. So we need to do this on every single bit of code, starting with background 0. We need to do the same for background 1, background 2, and for every bit of code you've got. And again, at the start of the game, when it's clicked, we've got forever. We're setting X to whatever the Scollx plus 480 times by 0. Here's that asterisk again that we had in our knowledge recall. What does the asterisk do? So we're going to build this up. It doesn't already exist in Scratch. We have to build this block of code up here. So Scollx plus 480 times 0. Now this is the starting position of each bit of our background. The 480 times 0. So that's its starting position. And it's being told to scroll X to scrolling background. So again, we're going to build this up. Let's bring Scratch back in. What I've now got, so I've gone on to background 0. Click on background 0. At the moment there's no code in there, and we're looking to build up this bit of code. So again, I need to start with an event at the start of the game. I'm just going to again make this larger so we can see what's going on. When the green flag is clicked, I need to forever, so I can go to control, forever, if you'll let me drag that in. So repeat. Make sure I've got the forever. So forever, I'm looking to, on my motion, set X to, and what I'm going to do is just build this up over here. I'm not actually going to complete it yet. Set X to. I'm going to need an operator. So the operator I need is the one with the multiply in it. So I've got that one with the multiply. I'm also going to need the operator with the plus in it, the adding, so I've got that. And I'm also going to need my variable. So you can see that I'm having to build this up, and the variable I'm needing is my Scollx, so I just bring this in here. So what I'm looking for is 480, so I can write that in, 480 times 0, and I can drag that block into my plus operator. So now I've got a larger block here, and I can drag my Scollx in. So I've now got Scollx plus 480 times 0. So that's exactly what I want. I can just drop that into my set X2. So you can see how I've built up this more complex block here. Set X2 Scollx plus 480 times 0. And I can drag all of that into my forever loop. So that's exactly what I wanted to create. That's the bit of code I need. And I can test this when I press the green flag. What I should be able to see is my first bit of background code, background 0, is moving along. So that's exactly what I want. Now you'll notice that background 1 and background 2 didn't move. And that's because I haven't duplicated this code over to the other backgrounds. Now there's a quick easy way to do this. I can just select this bit of code and drag it onto background 1. When I hover over background 1, you got a little wobble from the code. I can then just let go, and if I click on background 1, here is my code. Now the only thing I need to do, because this starting position is further along my x-axis, I just need to change this 0 to 1. So that's changed the code ready for this. And again, when I press green flag, you'll see that my code for background 0 and background 1 is moving. I haven't done the code for background 2 yet, so that stays still where it is. So again, I can go to background 0. I can drag this bit of code, this block of code, onto background 2. I can see a little wobble and let go. And on background 2, I can just change my starting position for this bit of code. So set Scollx to plus 480, and on this time times 2. So it's this number here I'm having to change every time for the different bits of background code. So again, now I can test as I'm going along, debug any problems. This is working fine. I can see my code moving. I can tidy up this little bit in a second. I can get through the first gap, and this is a slightly more tricky gap. I have to let the gravity allow me to fall. I would have been out, but I haven't set that yet, and click stop. Obviously I can now go on to create more bits of code. You can see here's a little gap at the top. This is where I can just move it up the tiniest little amount and just move it up or down to get it into exactly the right position that my code is going to, or my background game is going to work. So again, I can press stop. This second bit here, I can select the sprite and just move it so it's a little bit tidier as I go along. So I've been checking my game works as I intend. I've been changing these bits for the code for the different backgrounds, and I've now got a scrolling background that's going to work as I play my game. So you do need to test and debug as you progress through building your game. Once you've done that, you can save evidence of your game in your ePortfolio, explain what the different bits of code do, and you can submit that to your teacher for marking.